What if I told you that a lonely cowboy's entire life changed because his horse was keeping a love secret? Jake Thompson spent 34 years believing he was meant to be alone, drifting from ranch to ranch with nothing but calloused hands and broken dreams. Then his boss Earl died and left him everything: 500 acres, a house, and a prized horse named Thunder. Jake thought he'd finally found his home, but Thunder had other plans. Every morning this horse would break out of his stall and gallop straight to the neighbor's fence, calling out desperately to something Jake couldn't see. When Jake finally followed Thunder, he discovered the horse was in love with a mare named Star who belonged to Emma, the veterinarian next door. These animals had been separated by a fence built from human pride and stubbornness, but their hearts never forgot each other. What Jake didn't expect was that following Thunder's heart would lead him to his own destiny. Sometimes the greatest love stories aren't written by humans, they're taught by animals who understand what we've forgotten. Do you believe animals can be wiser than people when it comes to love? Tell me where you're watching from, because this story is about to show you how one horse's secret changed two lonely hearts forever. The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty trail as Jake Thompson guided his weathered pickup truck toward what was now his property. At 34, Jake had spent the better part of 2 decades drifting from ranch to ranch, his calloused hands and sun-weathered face telling the story of a man who knew hard work but had never known a permanent home. The Mackenzie Ranch stretched out before him like a mirage, 500 acres of red earth, scattered mesquite trees, and endless sky. Earl Mackenzie had been more than just a boss. He'd been the closest thing to family Jake had ever known. When the old rancher passed away 3 weeks ago, Jake had expected to pack his few belongings and move on to the next job, just like always. Instead, Earl's lawyer had handed him a set of keys and a deed. "Earl always said you were the only one who understood what this land meant," the lawyer had explained. "He left you everything: the ranch, the house, and Thunder." Thunder. Earl's prized quarter horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion with a white blaze down his face and spirit that matched the Arizona storms. Jake had worked with Thunder for 5 years, and the horse had always been cooperative, almost intuitive in his responses to Jake's commands. Jake parked his truck near the modest ranch house, a single-story adobe structure with a wraparound porch that Earl had built with his own hands 40 years ago. The silence was profound, broken only by the whisper of wind through the desert grass and the distant call of a red-tailed hawk. Walking toward the stable, Jake found Thunder pacing restlessly in his stall. The horse's ears were pricked forward, his dark eyes focused on something beyond the wooden walls. "Easy, boy," Jake murmured, approaching slowly. "I know this is different. Earl's gone, but I'm here now." Thunder whinnied softly but remained agitated. Jake had never seen the horse like this. Usually calm and steady, Thunder now seemed almost anxious, shifting his weight from hoof to hoof. Jake spent the rest of the day settling in, unpacking his sparse belongings into Earl's old bedroom. The house felt too big, too quiet. Every creak of the floorboards seemed to echo Earl's absence. As evening approached, Jake prepared Thunder's feed and led him out to the pasture for the night. That's when Thunder's behavior became truly strange. Instead of grazing peacefully as he always had, Thunder trotted directly to the eastern fence line, a sturdy wooden barrier that separated the Mackenzie property from the neighboring ranch. The horse stood there, neck stretched over the fence, whinnying into the gathering dusk. "What's got into you, Thunder?" Jake walked over, following the horse's gaze across the fence line. The neighboring property was well maintained, with a small house visible in the distance and what appeared to be a modest stable. Jake had never paid much attention to the neighbors during his years working for Earl. The old man had been notably private about the people next door, always changing the subject when Jake asked about them. Thunder pawed the ground and whinnied again, this time louder, more insistent. From somewhere across the fence came an answering call, the distinctive neigh of another horse. Jake frowned. In all his years here, he'd never noticed Thunder showing interest in anything beyond the Mackenzie property. The horse had always been content with his routine, his work, his familiar surroundings. As darkness fell, Jake finally managed to coax Thunder back toward the stable, but the horse kept looking back toward the fence, his ears constantly swiveling in that direction. That night, Jake lay in Earl's old bed, staring at the ceiling and listening to the unfamiliar sounds of his new home. Through the open window, he could hear Thunder moving restlessly in his stall, occasionally whinnying into the night. Something had changed, and Jake couldn't shake the feeling that Thunder was trying to tell him something important. Jake woke before dawn to the sound of splintering wood. Rushing outside in his boots and jeans, he found Thunder's stall door hanging open, the latch broken. Panic shot through him as he scanned the empty stable. "Thunder!" Jake called out, his voice echoing across the property. An answering whinny came from the direction of the eastern fence. Jake jogged toward the sound, his heart pounding. What he found stopped him in his tracks. Thunder stood pressed against the fence, his massive head stretched over the wooden rails. On the other side, a beautiful Palomino mare stood equally close, the two horses touching noses through the gap between the fence posts. Their interaction was gentle, intimate, like lovers reuniting after a long separation. "Well, I'll be damned," Jake whispered. The mare was stunning, golden coat gleaming in the early morning light, white mane flowing like silk. She was clearly well cared for, her coat healthy and her eyes bright with intelligence. "Thunder, what have you been hiding from me?" Jake approached slowly, not wanting to disturb the moment. Both horses turned to look at him, but neither moved away from the fence. Thunder nickered softly as if trying to explain something Jake couldn't understand. "Excuse me. Is that your horse?" Jake spun around to see a woman walking toward him from the neighboring property. She was petite but moved with confident strides, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore worn jeans, boots, and a veterinary clinic t-shirt that had seen better days. "Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry if he's bothering your mare. I'm Jake Thompson. I just inherited the Mackenzie place." The woman's expression softened slightly. "I heard about Earl. I'm sorry for your loss. I'm Emma Rodriguez." She gestured toward the horses. "And that Star. She's been acting strange for the past few days, restless, calling out toward your property." Jake studied Emma's face. She had kind eyes, the color of dark coffee, and there was something in her expression that suggested she knew more about this situation than she was letting on. "How long have they been doing this?" Jake asked, nodding toward the horses. Emma hesitated, glancing at the animals who were now nuzzling each other through the fence. "It's complicated. Star and Thunder, they have history." "What kind of history?" Emma sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Before Earl built this fence 2 years ago, the properties weren't separated. Star and Thunder used to run together, graze together. They were bonded." Jake felt pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. "What happened? Why did Earl build the fence?" Emma's jaw tightened. "There was a disagreement between Earl and my uncle, who owned this place before me. A business dispute that got personal. Earl decided he wanted clear boundaries between the properties. And the horses? Were separated." Emma's voice carried a note of sadness. "I inherited this place when my uncle passed last year. I'm a veterinarian and I've been trying to make a go of it on my own. Star has been lonely." Jake watched as Thunder gently groomed Star's neck through the fence, the mare leaning into his touch. The tenderness between the animals was unmistakable. "They've been meeting like this?" Jake asked. "Whenever they can. Star has broken out of her pasture 3 times in the past month, always heading for this fence. I've been repairing it thinking it was just poor maintenance, but now." Emma trailed off, watching the horses. "Now you know she was trying to get to Thunder." Emma nodded. "Animals don't forget love, Mr. Thompson. They don't understand human disputes or property lines. They just know what their hearts tell them." Jake found himself studying Emma's profile as she spoke. There was something about her, a combination of strength and vulnerability that reminded him of the wild horses he'd sometimes seen in the desert, beautiful but wary. "Call me Jake," he said. "And maybe we should talk about this. I don't know much about Earl's dispute with your uncle, but I do know Thunder. He's never acted like this before." Emma turned to face him fully, and Jake caught a glimpse of hope in her eyes. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that maybe it's time to let the past stay in the past. These horses clearly belong together." Thunder whinnied as if in agreement, and Star answered with a soft nicker that sounded almost like laughter. For the first time since inheriting the ranch, Jake felt like he might be exactly where he was supposed to be. Over the next 2 weeks, Jake and Emma fell into an unexpected routine. Every morning, they would meet at the fence line where Thunder and Star conducted their daily reunion. What started as brief conversations about the horses gradually evolved into longer discussions about ranching, veterinary work, and the challenges of making a life in the Arizona desert. Emma proved to be more than just a veterinarian. She was a skilled rancher who had been managing her property single-handedly since inheriting it. Jake found himself impressed by her knowledge and determination, and increasingly drawn to her quiet strength. "You know," Emma said one morning as they watched the horses graze on opposite sides of the fence, "I've been thinking about what you said. About letting the past stay in the past." Jake leaned against the fence post, studying her face. "And? I found some old papers in my uncle's desk. Letters between him and Earl." Emma pulled a folded envelope from her back pocket. The dispute wasn't about land or money. It was about water rights to the creek that runs through both properties. Jake knew the creek, a vital water source that meandered through the eastern section of both ranches. What about it? During the drought 3 years ago, both men were struggling to keep their cattle watered. Each accused the other of taking more than their fair share. The argument escalated until they stopped speaking entirely. And Earl built the fence. Right through the middle of what used to be shared grazing land. Emma unfolded one of the letters. "But look at this, it's Earl's handwriting, a letter he never sent. He admits he was wrong, that the water dispute was based on a misunderstanding. He wanted to apologize." Jake took the letter, reading Earl's familiar scrawl. The old rancher had indeed been ready to make amends, but pride had apparently prevented him from reaching out. "Two stubborn old men," Jake murmured. "And the horses paid the price. Along with anyone else who might have benefited from the friendship between the properties," Emma added quietly. Their eyes met, and Jake felt something shift between them, an acknowledgement of possibilities that extended beyond reuniting two horses. "Emma," Jake began, but was interrupted by a commotion from the horses. Thunder was pawing at the ground near the fence, whinnying urgently. Star was on her side, clearly in distress. "She's in labor," Emma said, immediately switching into veterinary mode. "This is early, I wasn't expecting her to foal for another 2 weeks." Jake watched as Emma vaulted over the fence with practiced ease, rushing to Star's side. The mare was struggling, and even from his position, Jake could see something was wrong. "Jake," Emma called out. "I need help. The foal is breached, I need to turn it, but I can't do it alone." Without hesitation, Jake climbed over the fence. "What do you need me to do?" "Hold her head, keep her calm. Talk to her." Emma was already examining Star, her hands gentle but efficient. "This is going to be difficult." For the next hour, Jake found himself in the middle of a life-or-death struggle. Emma worked with incredible skill and determination, but the foal was in a dangerous position. Star was weakening, and Jake could see the fear in Emma's eyes. Thunder stood as close to the fence as possible, nickering softly to Star as if offering encouragement. "Come on, girl," Jake whispered to the mare, stroking her neck. "You can do this. Thunder's right here with you." Emma made one final adjustment, and suddenly the foal slipped free, a tiny, perfect copy of Star with Thunder's distinctive white markings. "It's a colt," Emma breathed, exhaustion and relief evident in her voice. Star immediately began cleaning her baby, her maternal instincts taking over. The foal was small but appeared healthy, already attempting to lift his head. Jake looked at Emma, who was sitting back on her heels, covered in dust and sweat but smiling. "You saved them both." "We saved them," Emma corrected. "I couldn't have done it without you." Thunder whinnied from the fence, and Star answered with a soft nicker. The new family was complete, even if separated by wooden rails. "Emma," Jake said, his voice serious. "This fence has to come down." Emma nodded, tears in her eyes as she watched the foal struggle to stand. "I know. It's time." As the sun set over the Arizona desert, Jake and Emma sat side by side, watching Star nurse her newborn while Thunder stood guard from the other side of the fence. The barriers between the properties suddenly seemed not just unnecessary but cruel. Tomorrow Jake decided they would start tearing down more than just fences. 3 months later, the fence between the Mackenzie and Rodriguez properties was nothing but a memory. In its place, a shared pasture stretched across both ranches, where Thunder, Star, and their colt, whom Jake and Emma had named Hope, grazed together as a family. Jake stood on the porch of Emma's house, watching the horses in the early morning light. Emma emerged from the kitchen with 2 cups of coffee, settling beside him on the wooden swing her uncle had built years ago. "Hard to believe it's only been 3 months, Emma said, handing him a steaming mug. Jake smiled, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "Feels like a lifetime." The transformation had been remarkable. Not only had they removed the physical barrier between their properties, but they had also discovered how much stronger they were working together. Emma's veterinary skills complemented Jake's ranching experience perfectly. They had expanded both operations, taking on additional cattle and offering veterinary services to neighboring ranches. "Mrs. Patterson called this morning," Emma said. "She wants us to look at her prize bull next week. Says she won't trust anyone else after what we did for the Morrisons' herd." Jake chuckled. Word travels fast in ranch country. Especially when it comes with a good story. Emma leaned into his warmth. The veterinarian and the cowboy who learned about love from their horses. In the pasture, Hope was growing strong and confident, already showing signs of his father's intelligence and his mother's gentle nature. Thunder had proven to be an attentive father, always keeping watch while Star grazed, teaching the young colt the boundaries of their expanded territory. "I've been thinking," Jake said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "About what?" "About making this official. The partnership, I mean." Jake reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "All of it." Emma's breath caught as Jake opened the box to reveal a simple but beautiful diamond ring, not flashy, but perfect for a woman who worked with her hands and valued substance over show. "Emma Rodriguez," Jake said, sliding off the swing to kneel in front of her. "You and Star saved Thunder and me from a life of loneliness. You taught us that love isn't about possession or territory, it's about partnership, trust, and building something together." Emma's eyes filled with tears as she looked down at the man who had become her best friend, her business partner, and the love of her life. "Will you marry me?" Jake asked. "Will you help me turn these 2 ranches into one home?" "Yes," Emma whispered, then louder, "Yes, of course, yes." As Jake slipped the ring onto her finger, Thunder whinnied from the pasture as if celebrating the moment. Star and Hope looked up from their grazing, and for a moment, it seemed like the entire ranch was holding its breath in happiness. Later that evening, as they sat together watching the sunset paint the Arizona sky in shades of gold and crimson, Emma rested her head on Jake's shoulder. "Do you think Earl would approve?" she asked. Jake considered the question, thinking about the old rancher who had given him not just a home, but a chance at a real life. "I think Earl knew exactly what he was doing when he left me, Thunder. He knew that horse would lead me to what I needed most." "And what was that?" "You," Jake said simply. "A family. A future." In the distance, Thunder, Star, and Hope grazed peacefully together, their love story having paved the way for another. The desert wind carried the scent of sage and the promise of rain, and for the first time in his life, Jake Thompson felt like he was exactly where he belonged. The ranch that had once been divided by pride and misunderstanding was now united by love, both human and equine. And as the stars began to appear in the vast Arizona sky, 2 hearts that had been as lonely as the desert itself beat in perfect harmony, guided by the wisdom of horses who had never forgotten that love finds a way.